The story you believe about Ring Around the Rosie is a complete and total fabrication. The idea that this innocent children's game is a secret history of the Black Death or the Great Plague of London is entirely false. It is a piece of modern fakelore, a ghost story invented centuries after the fact, projected onto a rhyme that remembers something far, far older. So if this rhyme isn't a chilling monument to a medieval plague, what is it? That is the real mystery we are here to solve. And I promise you, by the end of this investigation, you won't just know the popular theory is a lie. You will finally understand this rhyme's true, almost forgotten purpose. A sacred, ancient ritual designed not to describe death, but to hold it back. You know the scene. We all do. It's a memory burned into our collective childhood. A circle of children, their hands linked, faces bright with innocent fun. They shuffle around and around, their voices rising together in that deceptively cheerful chant. You can almost hear it now. Ring around the Rosie, and you remember exactly what you were told that means. The Rosie, of course, is the gruesome ring-shaped rash that marked the plague's victims. The dreaded bubo, a red circle with a dark center, a target painted on the body by death itself. Then comes the next line, a desperate futile defense. A pocket full of posies. You see the frightened villagers, clutching little bouquets of herbs and flowers to their faces. A fragrant shield meant to ward off the foul air. The miasma they believed carried the pestilence. It was a desperate act of folk medicine, a pocket full of hope against a world filled with the stench of decay. And then the inevitable, final symptom. A-tishoo, A-tishoo. The violent, rattling sneeze that signaled the lungs were failing, the body's last surrender. And it all culminates in that final, terrifying line. The one that sends a shiver down your spine, even as a child, long before you understand its supposed meaning. We all fall down. The game stops. The circle is broken. The children collapse in a heap on the grass, a playful imitation of a world falling to its knees. This, we are told, is the moment of death. It is the final, grim tally of the plague's devastation. A whole society collapsing, one body at a time. It's a haunting story that transforms a simple playground game into a living monument to one of the greatest traumas in human history. A secret whispered from one generation of children to the next. I'm genuinely curious, and I'd love to see this in the comments. Do you remember where you were when you first heard the dark version of this rhyme? For so many of us, it was a playground revelation that turned a simple game into something chilling. It's a powerful, chilling story. And almost every single part of it is a lie. This grim interpretation, this secret history that feels so right, so satisfyingly dark, simply doesn't hold up to scrutiny. When you begin to treat this rhyme not as a ghost story, but as an archaeological artifact, the popular myth crumbles to dust. The timeline is wrong. The symptoms are wrong. Even the words are wrong. The truth has nothing to do with the plague. Instead, it's a coded message from a world that existed long before it. So, if the plague story is a modern ghost, a historical echo that never was, what is the real memory trapped inside this rhyme? The answer isn't in our history books. It's buried much deeper, in the forgotten rituals of the ancient world, in a time when magic was a part of everyday life. And the first clue that unlocks it all is hidden in the single most iconic image of the rhyme. The rose. This isn't just a flower, it's a key to a completely different reality. The first and most devastating blow to the plague theory is a simple matter of time. The evidence just isn't there. The Great Plague of London, the event most commonly associated with the rhyme, struck in 1665. The Black Death was even earlier, tearing through Europe in the mid-1300s. These are the historical anchors for the myth, but the rhyme itself is a ghost in the historical record. You see, unlike the subscribe button which creates a permanent record of your place in this community, the story of the plague didn't create the rhyme. Folklorists and historians have scoured centuries of documents, looking for any mention of it, any hint of its existence, and they've found nothing. The very first time Ring a Roses appears in print in a form we would recognize today is in 1881 in Kate Greenaway's illustrated book, Mother Goose, or The Old Nursery Rhymes. Think about that for a moment. That's more than 200 years after the Great Plague of London. Proponents of the theory will argue that it was passed down orally, a secret whispered from child to child across the generations. But this is highly, highly unlikely. We have written records of other nursery rhymes from the 17th and 18th centuries. Rhymes like pat a cake and ba ba black sheep all have documented histories that stretch back much further. Why would this one, supposedly a direct and visceral response to one of the most significant events in English history, leave no trace? The story of the plague didn't create the rhyme. It was a story that was attached to it much, much later, like a label stuck on an ancient bottle. The connection is a modern invention, a myth created to explain a mystery. But this is just the first crack in the foundation. Because once we expose how the symptoms and the words themselves are also wrong, we can finally turn to the most shocking part of this whole mystery: the true ritualistic meaning of "we all fall down." With the timeline shattered, the next pillar of the plague myth to fall is the one that seems most convincing: the so-called medical evidence. The entire plague theory hinges on the idea that the rhyme is a literal description of the disease's progression. The ring of roses is said to be the red, ring-shaped rash. But this is a profound medical misunderstanding. While some forms of the plague could cause skin lesions or spots, a rosy, ring-shaped rash is not a hallmark symptom of bubonic plague. It's not the telltale sign that doctors and chroniclers of the time described. The primary and most horrifying symptom was the bubo, a massive, painful swelling of the lymph nodes in the groin, armpits, or neck. These were agonizing, not rosy. Then there's the sneeze. The line, "A-tishoo, A-tishoo," feels like a perfect fit, a clear reference to the final stages of the illness. The problem? That line is almost exclusively found in modern American versions of the rhyme. The earliest English versions, the ones from the 19th century, don't mention sneezing at all. Instead, they often say, "ashes, ashes." The so-called medical clues within the rhyme aren't historical facts at all. They are actually convenient coincidences and later alterations, retrofitted to support a compelling but ultimately baseless story. The disease described in the myth simply doesn't match the historical reality of the plague. Beyond the timeline and the medical inaccuracies, the lyrics themselves are a puzzle that the plague theory cannot solve. If this rhyme was a consistent historical record of a specific event, you would expect its core elements to be stable, but they aren't. When we look at versions of this rhyme from around the world, the story falls apart completely. The rhyme exists in many countries, and its variations are wild and telling. In Germany, a much earlier version recorded in 1796, called Ringel Ringel Rosen, has children singing about sitting under an elder tree. There is absolutely no mention of falling down or death at all. At the end of the song, the children simply squat or curtsy. No plague, no tragedy, just a simple children's game. Even within English-speaking countries, the variations are significant. As we've seen, the earliest known English text uses ashes, ashes, not A-tishoo. Some early American versions replace the sneeze with the words hoosha, hoosha, suggesting a moment of quiet or stillness, not a violent symptom of disease. The idea that ashes, ashes refers to the cremation of plague victims is another modern assumption that doesn't fit the history. The lyrical evidence doesn't point to a single, coherent story. Instead, it suggests a collection of floating verses and actions that have been mixed and matched over time. The only consistent elements are the circle, some form of flowers or plants, and a final action of falling, squatting, or bowing. With the history, the medicine, and the words all pointing away from the plague, it begs one crucial question. Why is this fake story so powerful? Understanding the answer is the final step before we can unlock the rhyme's true, ancient purpose and decode the hidden power of the ashes. But before that, why does this story have such a powerful grip on our imagination? The answer is psychological. We are deeply drawn to the idea of uncovering a dark, hidden truth behind the innocence of childhood. It gives us a thrill, a little intellectual aha moment. It makes us feel like we've been initiated into a secret history, that we see the world more clearly than others. Have you ever wondered why some children's rhymes and games feel so strange, so ancient? Let me know in the comments below. This specific theory really took off in the mid-20th century, a time when society was fascinated with Freudian psychology, with the idea of uncovering hidden meanings, repressed traumas, and dark undercurrents in everyday life. The plague interpretation was first popularized by writers like James Leeser in his 1961 book, The Plague and the Fire. It spread from there, becoming a piece of popular folklore, or as some experts call it, fakelore. The myth persists not because it is supported by evidence, but because it fulfills a deep human need to find meaning and darkness in the mundane. But in clinging to this modern ghost story, we have blinded ourselves to the far stranger and more ancient truth the rhyme is actually protecting. To find the real story, we have to throw away our history books and pick up a different kind of map. One that leads us into the world of symbols, folk magic, and pre-Christian belief. Let's start by excavating the true meaning of the central image, the rose. In the plague myth, the rose is a symbol of disease. But in the ancient world, it was the exact opposite. For centuries, long before the plague, the rose was a powerful symbol of protection, secrecy, and the sacred. In ancient Rome, it was associated with Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. A wild rose hung on the door of a room signified that whatever was said inside was confidential. This gave rise to the Latin phrase sub rosa, meaning under the rose, a term that meant anything done in secret or in confidence. So, what was a ring of roses? It was likely never a description of a skin rash. We believe it was a literal or symbolic boundary. Imagine ancient villagers, or even just children playing a game passed down from their ancestors, forming a circle. This circle, this ring of roses, was not a sign of sickness. It was the creation of a sacred space. This was never a game about dying. From the very beginning, it was a ritual about creating a sanctuary. The very first line of the rhyme isn't a symptom, it's an incantation, a verbal casting of a protective circle. The children are not imitating the dead. They are stepping into a place of power, a tradition that echoed through European folklore for centuries. So the circle itself is a boundary of magical protection. But what the rhyme instructs us to bring inside that circle is even more fascinating. Let's re-examine the next line. A pocket full of posies. In the plague myth, this is a desperate, pathetic attempt to block the smell of death, but through the lens of folk magic, it becomes something far more potent. A posy wasn't just a random bunch of flowers. It was a carefully selected bouquet of herbs and plants, each chosen for its specific magical properties. This was a core part of what anthropologists call apotropaic magic, magic designed to avert evil. For countless generations, people believed that certain plants held power. Rowan was used to ward off witches. St. John's wort was used to repel demons. Lavender was for purification. A pocket full of posies wasn't some primitive air freshener. It was actually a wearable charm, a powerful amulet made of living things. It was like carrying a shield of protective energy. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other superstitions are actually fragments of these forgotten magical systems? Within the context of a protective ritual, this makes perfect sense. First, you create the sacred space, the ring of roses. Then you bring your personal protective wards, your pocket full of posies, into that circle. You are layering protections. You see, the rhyme isn't a passive description of events. It's actually a set of active instructions for a magical working. It's a formula for creating a zone of safety, using the oldest tools available to humanity. The power of symbols and the power of nature. The next piece of evidence isn't in the words, but in the action itself, the circle dance. The act of joining hands and moving in a circle is one of the most primordial and universal forms of human ritual. It is found in nearly every culture on Earth from the dawn of time. Why? Because a circle is a symbol of unity, eternity, and wholeness. But more than that, the act of creating a circle through dance is a way of creating what is known as a liminal space. The word liminal comes from the Latin word for threshold. A liminal space is a place that is neither here nor there. It's a doorway between worlds. By joining hands and moving as one, the participants are symbolically separating themselves from the mundane, everyday world and entering a place of magical potential. This is the engine of the ritual. The ring of roses sets the boundary. The posies provide personal protection, and the circle dance activates the space. This is fundamental to countless pagan and folk traditions. Think of the dances of the witches' coven, or the celebratory circle dances at seasonal festivals like May Day. The physical motion here is more than just fun. It is the very mechanism by which the ritual's purpose is achieved. The children in the playground, shuffling around in a circle, are unconsciously reenacting a ritual technology that is thousands of years old. They are not just playing a game. They are participating in a fragmented echo of a ceremony designed to open a door to another reality, to a source of power that could influence the physical world. And this brings us to the linchpin of the entire mystery, the single clue that connects all the others and shatters the plague theory for good. It's the line that was replaced in modern America with a sneeze. Ashes, ashes. The plague myth tries to explain this as a reference to cremation, an idea we've already shown to be historically inaccurate for the period. But what if ashes isn't about the end of life? What if it's about the source of life, protection, and purification? Throughout the ancient pagan world and surviving for centuries in folk customs, the ash from sacred fires was considered one of the most powerfully magical substances a person could possess. Consider the great pagan festivals of Europe, like the Beltane fires in Celtic tradition, which marked the beginning of summer, or the Yule log burned during the winter solstice. The fires themselves were for purification, but the ashes left behind were the tangible result of that magic. These were not just worthless cinders. This ash was carefully collected and used in a dozen different ways. Farmers would scatter it on their fields to ensure a bountiful harvest. People would rub it on their bodies and the bodies of their livestock to grant health and protection for the coming year. The line, ashes, ashes, has nothing to do with death. It represents the central, magical act of the ritual. Now, with this new understanding, we can finally decode the rhyme's final, mysterious line. We all fall down. This ritual act of purification is the climax of the ceremony's power, and it sets the stage for the final instruction, the one line that the plague myth got so tragically wrong. This final action has nothing to do with dying from the plague. It is the last logical step in a ritual of protection and reverence. In folk dances and religious ceremonies across the world, a sudden drop to the ground, a prostration, a deep bow, a curtsy, is an act of submission to a higher power. It is a gesture of respect to a spirit, a deity, or the earth itself. After creating the sacred circle, arming themselves with wards, raising energy through the dance, and purifying themselves with sacred ash, the participants perform the final act. They fall down. They aren't dying. What they're doing is bowing. They are showing reverence to the very force they have just invoked for protection. So, what is Ring Around the Rosie? It is a ghost. But it's not the ghost of a plague we're seeing. What we have uncovered is the fragmented, half-remembered ghost of an ancient pagan protection ritual. A ritual that instructed people on how to keep themselves safe from unseen dangers in a world full of magic and fear. Step 1. Create a sacred, protected space, a ring of roses. Step 2. Bring your personal magical wards into that space, a pocket full of posies. Step 3. Activate the space and purify it with a sacred element, the ashes from a ritual fire. In Step 4, show reverence to the spirits or gods you've called upon for aid. We all fall down. If a simple nursery rhyme can hide a complete, forgotten pagan ritual, imagine the real-life crime that was deliberately buried by the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. Click the video on screen now to uncover the 800-year-old murder that the myth was designed to hide.